You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Flora's Glass and Mirror Company, servicing the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm your host, Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. I've got a lot of ground to cover tonight. Today is Wednesday, the 1st of September. So in case if you're watching us on Wednesday night, September the 1st, we are live. If you're watching us any other time, you're watching a replay. But today is Wednesday, September 1st, and we're glad you could be here with us tonight. As I said, we've got a lot of ground to cover. I've had a couple requests this week about different topics, and I welcome those, by the way. I'm always happy to hear your requests, and we'll do our best to do a little research, maybe grab some pictures and put some content together for you. But I happened to run into a viewer this week who said he remembered from the Evening Telegram years ago, up in the upper right-hand corner, about this time of the year when tobacco season was, harvest season was in, and tobacco was going to the curing barns to be dried and so forth. There were obviously a fair number of fires periodically throughout the drying season. And he said he remembers there being a little blip in the upper right-hand corner of the telegram that gave a reference to the number of fires or the fact that there had been fires, whatever, tobacco barn fires. And so he asked if I could try to find something on those. And so I did. I went looking. Unfortunately, I didn't find, and I looked through several years worth of Rocky Mountain telegrams looking to see if I could find any one of those listings in the upper right-hand corner. Maybe some of you remember this. If you do, give us a call. 407-1111 is the number, and we'll talk about it. But I did find some interesting information, and we'll share a few pictures and a little bit of information we found about the tobacco barn fires over the years. We'll get to that shortly. Had another viewer ask about some baseball history in Rocky Mount. You know, we've had a long and storied history of baseball here in Rocky Mount. I have some very fond memories as a child going to the Rocky Mount Municipal Stadium and watching the ball games out there. I know some of you did too. And we've got a couple notable personalities from Rocky Mount. Well, one from Rocky Mount and one that played here. We'll show you some pictures and talk about those a little bit later on too. But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to wrap up a couple things. I did a little more digging, and my good buddy Eric Dawson and I have been kind of beating down this issue about the Homestead Hotel up in Virginia Beach. If you remember, for the last couple of weeks, last couple of shows, we showed pictures of those, that hotel up there, and there seemed to be some confusion about ownership, and so the best we can tell, it looks like when Carlton Noel married his second wife. Now keep in mind, his first wife died in 1955. That was Virginia. And then he married Annie Holt, I think was her last name, in 1956. And when that second marriage took place, it's believed that Annie's family, kin to the Mayos over from Tarboro, already had in possession or ownership that Homestead Beach Cottage up in Virginia Beach. And so we, from 1961-62, we were able to find some references to there be a co-ownership between Nick Body and his aunt of ownership of that cottage. And so we're pretty sure that that is how it was, at least in the early 1960s, that it was co-owned between Nick Body and his aunt. Prior to that, we think that his aunt's family owned it. We're not exactly sure how far that ownership goes back. But I did find an interesting envelope from 1949. Lee, if you would, just bring that first picture up. It's just a picture of an envelope, but I stumbled across this purely by accident, and it's actually an envelope from the Homestead Hotel. And I use the term hotel because I think that's the way it was marketed. And this is from 1949. You can see this. It's got the upper left-hand corner there. That's the address and so forth. And it says oceanfront near 22nd Street, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I went and did a Google Street search of that area, and there's a multi-story hotel there now at that 22nd Street where it junctions into the shoreline there. So obviously this building, this hotel, motel, home, whatever you want to call it, is no longer there. And we're not sure when it went away, but as early as 1949, the Homestead Beach Cottage was there. And I say beach cottage because I think it was built more or less like a really, really nice home. And so the original people who built that place really had a taste, I guess you'd say, for the finer things in life. And it was really a well-built, well-appointed place to stay at the beach. And I'm not sure it started out to be the homestead. We've not been able to determine that for certain. It very well could have been that it was built and immediately referred to as the homestead. But in any case, this was from 1949. This envelope, just, I don't know how it came to be stored in a bunch of pictures referencing. I actually found this. There's a really neat Virginia Beach Public Library website. And they've got a bunch of old pictures there, Virginia Beach over the years. So if you've got an interest in this kind of stuff, you can go online and just do a Google search for Virginia Beach Public Library, and I found this picture there. Let's go to the next picture too, because there's only 2 or 3 in this little grouping here, and these are all. This is another image, and this is very similar to one we showed last week. Directly in this, and I apologize, but I do have another image of this exact same shot that was taken further out in front of the cottage, actually in the beach, on the sand, and in the sand out on the beach. So from where this picture was taken, this photographer would have been standing out in the beach on the sand, because this literally was ocean front. It was right on the ocean. And so like this is from roughly 1950s, we think. It's a postcard, obviously. You can see at the bottom it says postcard. And it's got an address of 2204 Ocean Front. So I'm not sure how the street designations went back at that time frame, back in the late 40s, early 50s. But in any case, this is how it looked in the 1950s. And I think, Lee, there may be one more in this grouping. Let's go ahead and show this next one. There you go. And this is a little bit later, from the 1960s. And again, this gentleman sitting on the balcony there, the steps there, is facing out toward the ocean. It was literally, as I said, oceanfront property. And you can tell it was a big property. I think this thing had, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 bedrooms and 4 or 5 bathrooms, huge dining area. It was just a really magnificent place to stay. And as I said, I don't know if it was built originally as a home and then became a sort of motel, upper class motel / hotel in later years. Or if it was built to be exactly what it ended up being. But in any case, it was very, very nicely appointed, very swanky place, from what I understand, back in from the late 40s up through the early 60s. So, okay. I mentioned earlier that we'd had someone express interest in the tobacco barns and tobacco barn fires and so forth. And so I went in search of pictures and images and a little history to see if I could find something. And I was a little bit surprised by what I did find. Certainly, you know, back in the early days of tobacco growing, back in the 20s and 30s, most tobacco was dried out in barns, you know, using wood stoves or whatever. There were some oil-fired stoves too back then, but it was just a recipe for a fire. If you think about it, old wooden structure, dried out tobacco leaves, a fire with embers, and you know, these things were drafty too, so I'm sure there's wind blowing through them. So I mean, it was just a recipe for a fire to take place, and as you might imagine, it was quite common, in fact, for fires to burn down tobacco warehouses where tobacco was being dried, and of course the entire crop that was stored in that particular barn would have been destroyed too. But I found this interesting article, and picture, I should say, not article, but a picture from 1947 in the Telegram. And let's just go ahead and put this next picture up if you would. This is from the Rocky Mount Telegram in 1947. And it's basically a welcome to the farmer, to the Rocky Mount Tobacco Market. And this was really, you know, something I've found a recurring theme here, where certain times throughout the year, either when a new business would open up or a business would expand their operation or relocate to a new location, it was commonplace for other businesses around town to place an ad in the newspaper and basically either congratulate them or welcome them to the new location. In this case, it was the Auto Equip Company, pardon me, welcoming the tobacco farmers to town for the tobacco market. And as I said, this was from August of 1947, August the 19th, in fact. And Auto Equip, many of you remember Mr. J.D. Winston over on Washington Street, had a machine shop down at the very end down there at Bassett Street, where comes off of Church Street, goes over the railroad tracks, a little brick building right there. That was a machine shop. And that was, when I was a teenager, that's where the motor rebuilding was taking place, and it was where it was done. They refurbished heads there, machined heads and so forth, and everything from grinding blocks to assembling motors and rebuilding engines and so forth. I'm not sure when that came to be. This, from 1947, this ad seems to imply that it's all done at the Washington Street location, but as I said, I remember certainly back in the 60s and 70s, that machine shop down there on Bassett Street was where a lot of this work was done. So anyway, again, this is a welcome to the farmers in 1947 from the Auto Equip Company, saying, okay, hey, you know, you guys come into town, sell your tobacco. If you need to have your tractor transmission rebuilt or your motor rebuilt or your farm truck motor rebuilt, come see us, we'll take care of you. Okay, Lee, let's go to this next picture. This is a chart, and I thought this was kind of interesting. I found this actually in a website that I was looking at, referencing, this was specifically addressing Rocky Mount tobacco barn fires. And as you can see, it goes back to the 1930s and goes all the way up to the 1970s. And certainly in the 1940s, 50s, even into the 60s, there was just tremendous amount of tobacco barn fires every year. And you see there, 1930s, I guess, I don't know what changed between the 30s and 40s. I guess the amount of tobacco that was processed probably most likely is what attributes to this increase in number of barn fires, because there was more tobacco being farmed, harvested, and of course dried out, and so that led to more barn fires. But you see the 1940s, 808 barn fires were recorded, 1950s, 772, in the 1960s, 628, and by the 70s, I think they got it figured out. They went to a more sophisticated drying, more like aluminum metal barns, more sophisticated equipment to dry. Oh, we got a call. Let's get this call here. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
All right, that big time drop back of barn fires, probably what you're showing there is probably directly attributed to the fact that by the 1970s, the old-timey tobacco barns kind of started taking the back seat to the new style, what do you call them?
The flue cured tobacco?
Bulk barns.
There you go. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, And they were all of them metal too.
Right.
Yep.
All right.
All right, buddy. Thank you now. Okay, so as I said, you know, obviously there was a trend over the years to migrate away from the old wooden barns and the earlier ways of drying out tobacco, and that certainly cut down on the amount of fires. In 1947, let's go to the next picture, Lee. This was an article I found here in the Telegram, and it was talking about a fire where there was $2 million of damage. And this really shocked me. I don't know why it should. Tobacco's always been a big cash crop in this part of the country. But to think about $2 million of tobacco getting burned up in a tobacco barn fire was just something I was not expecting to see. And as I said, this was from August of 1947. So, and I'm sure this wasn't the only one that was in that price range. I'm sure there were others too. But, you know, this was just happened to be one article I ran across. And it made a reference to not only was the barn destroyed, but the contents as well. And that's what got that $2 million damage assessment there. I mentioned a few minutes ago that a lot of farmers, a lot of local businesses would welcome the farmers to town when the tobacco harvest came around and the tobacco markets opened up around here. And this next picture is actually an advertisement. Go ahead, Lee, put that next one if you would. This is from 1947 also, and this is from Effords. Now, some of you more seasoned viewers will remember Effords Department Store. It was down on the south end of Main Street, over on the southwest section of the street down there, not too far down from the train station, where Station Square Mall is now. But this was from, again, August of 1947, and it was basically a welcome from the Effords Department Store to the local farmers that were coming to town. You got to remember too, they were coming to town, bringing tobacco, selling their tobacco. So for a lot of these farmers, for the first time in many months, they had some money in their pockets. So the businesses were welcoming them, hoping they'd stop by and spend some of that tobacco money. And indeed, a lot of that money did get spent here locally. Rocky Mount had a really nice injection of cash, if you will, when the tobacco markets opened up and the farmers brought the tobacco to town and it got sold. And so these stores knew the best way to entice these farmers into their places of business was to welcome them, and they would have sales and special events going on, and certainly efforts participated in that. The next picture here, Lee, if you would, let's go to the next one. And this is also from 1947. And pay careful attention to this picture, because when I first saw this, I thought, well, that building is gone. That building's not there anymore. And because I didn't remember seeing anything that looked like this. But lo and behold, I went to looking into city directories and looking at street images and so forth. The building is still there. In fact, Lee, if you go to the next picture, you'll notice a little bit of difference in the Efforts building itself. And this picture here is actually from 2007. But where that city trends is, that was the Efforts building, and you see the top part of the building has been, in fact, the whole facade of the front of the building has been redone by this time. And of course, this is, golly, 50, almost 60 years later, that this remodeling, if you will. And I'm not sure when the remodeling itself took place, but I'm just saying this is many years after that 1947 picture. But this is Station Square Mall. Now, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything in that space now. I think it's empty, actually, that one particular place. But if you before we go back, I want to go back to the prior picture, but before we do, if you look just to the left of that city trend space, that building to the left, a little bit of an overhang coming out the front, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows, it looks like. So now, Lee, go back to that prior picture, if you would, and just want to compare, because if you look, it's kind of hard, it's a little grainy picture, not the best quality, but if you look to the left of this Efforts department store, you can see the same little jutting out part at the top up there, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like it might be 6 windows here. So these buildings have been remodeled somewhat over the years, but I was a little surprised, frankly. I didn't remember. We've talked about Efforts before in prior shows. I knew that it was in existence, and I knew roughly where it had been, but I didn't realize that the building is still there today. So, okay, I tell you what, Lee, bring it back to me. This is a good time to take our first commercial break. When we come back, we got some more pictures to show you. I'll talk a little bit more about some tobacco barn fires and so forth. And we're going to get into some baseball, talk about some baseball a little bit around Rocky Mount early years. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Flores Glass and Mirror Company, servicing the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Flores Glass and Mirror Company, servicing the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
And we're back. Folks, for just tuning in, you're watching Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcox. Glad you could join us. Before the break, we were talking about the tobacco farmers bringing their tobacco to town, and of course that was always a big thing this time of year when the tobacco farmers would bring their harvested tobacco to town and sell it. All the local businesses would kind of go out of their way to welcome these farmers and try to entice them into their stores to spend some of that hard-earned tobacco money. And I mentioned the efforts was just one of many. Certainly the Auto Equip store, I mentioned those as well. There were others. And we were talking a little bit about the barn fires too. And as I said, I had a viewer that asked me to try to find or see if we could locate any copies or any issues of the Rocky Mountain Telegram that had in the upper right-hand corner of the page a reference to the tobacco fires for the week or for the month or whatever, or for the season. And I honestly did look, I just couldn't find any. So not doubting that they were there, it's just the years that I looked in just didn't seem to have any of them. But I did find multiple references to tobacco barns throughout the years, and as Eric alluded to earlier, and in later years, as to the quality of the tobacco barns themselves, the bulk barns became better. The fuel they used and the methods they used to dry tobacco out became better. There was certainly a major decline in barn fires, and now if you see a barn on fire, it's probably because some volunteer fire departments practicing their firefighting techniques on it. I think we got one more picture that is a reference to a fire, a picture of a fire, actually a barn fire that took place in Westmount in 1963. Zoom out just a bit there if you would, Lee. And I mentioned earlier about the other barn fire that consumed $2 million worth of tobacco. This one was over $100,000, $113,000 in fact. But these were big losses, obviously. These farmers, would suffer a fairly significant loss of income when these fires would take place, and it's a shame really to think back about how many spent several months cultivating and growing tobacco and harvesting tobacco, and then get in the barn, get it ready to take to market, and lose it all in a barn fire. Sadly, it happened all too often, and this was just another incident from, again, 1963. Okay, we were talking before the break also about some baseball, and I have some very fond memories of going to the Rocky Mountain Municipal Stadium as a kid, watching a few baseball games. I played a little bit of baseball myself. I never played out there, and I was never very good. I'll say that without a reservation. But I did enjoy the game. My father was an avid baseball fan. My grandfather was an avid baseball fan, and ironically, I'm sad to say I don't ever recall going to a baseball game with my father. But I did go to my grandfather. I guess my father, like a lot of working fathers, worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs when I was growing up. So we didn't get a chance to spend a whole lot of time together when I was a child. But certainly my grandfather took me on a few occasions to the ballpark over at Municipal Stadium, and we watched some games over there. And I always enjoyed going to those games. So I went in hunt of what I could find about not only the game of baseball in this area and the teams that played, but the stadium, and just see what I could find. And I apologize, I got this notice, this request, if you will, literally this morning, and so I didn't have a whole lot of time to put into doing research. But what I did find, I thought was kind of interesting, and I've got some printouts here. I'm just going to read through some of these. But many of you remember there was 2 baseball teams prominent that most of us will remember, the Rocky Mountain Leafs and the Rocky Mountain Pines. The Leafs played from 1941 to 1952 in the Coastal Plain, and then they played in the Carolina League from 1962 to 1972. The Rocky Mountain Pines baseball team played in the Class A Carolina League for the 1980 season, and they had a horrible season that year. They went 24-114, 24 wins against 114 losses. Hal Fickman was the manager that year, and Lou Hangless was the owner of the Pines. And some previous names, I forgot about some of them. I heard some of these before, but I'd forgotten about it. Over the years, In 1980, the Rocky Mount Pines. From 1973 to 1975, they were the Rocky Mount Phillies. 1941, and then again from 1947 to 1952, they were the Rocky Mount Leafs. Also, in 62 and 63, they were the Leafs, as well as from 1965 to 1972, they were the Rocky Mount Leafs. In 1964, they were known as the Rocky Mount Senators. In 1942 and 1946, they were known as the Rocky Mount Rocks, R-O-C-K-S. And though some might, attribute that name to being somewhat derogatory, I think the consensus was that it was just a shortened version of the name Rocky, or town, city name of Rocky Mount. But they were called the Rocky Mount Rocks in 1942 and in the 1946 season. From 1936 to 1940, the local Rocky Mount baseball team was known as the Rocky Mount Red Sox. From 1927 to 1929, they were called the Rocky Mount Buccaneers. In 1924, they were known as the Rocky Mount Broncos. In 1916 and 1917, and then again from 1920 to 1923, our local Rocky Mount baseball team was known as the Tar Heels. How about that? In 1915, they were known as the Rocky Mount Carolinians. The Rocky Mount Carolinians in 1915. And then from 1909 to 1910, our local baseball team was referred to as the Rocky Mount Railroaders. So there you go. Also, in 1975, the Phillies was a Class A affiliate of the Philadelphia Phillies. And again, they played in the Carolina League, and they won the league championship in 1975. And I saw several references while I was doing a little bit of research earlier this evening. Rocky Mount over the years fielded several very good baseball teams. They won their share of titles in these small AA leagues. And this, over the years, we just had some very good ball players. Not all of them were from Rocky Mount originally, but we were able to attract some very good talent. I had some very good coaches, and Rocky Mount had some very good baseball teams over the years. It says the Rocky Mount Phillies replaced the Rocky Mount Leafs, which had been affiliated with the Detroit Tigers from 1965 to 1972. And of course, the club played at the Rocky Mount Municipal Stadium. And I tell you what, Lee, let's go ahead then to the next picture. This is actually, I think, from 1952. And this is just a program. Oh, we forgot this picture here. This was another barn fire. I'm sorry. I thought we were done with the barn fire. But this is just another one from Westmount. I think I mentioned Westmount earlier, and we actually showed another picture. But this was the Westmount fire, and this was from 1963, actually. Tobacco barn fire there. Okay. All right. Now, Lee, let's go to the next picture. And this one should be from the 1952 Rocky Mount Leafs. This was a program that would hand out to you. There you go. Free booster scorebook, 1952 Leafs. And you see at the bottom, it was sponsored by Gaiman's Jewelers. Downtown Rocky Mount, they sponsored this program for this season, 1952. And if you would, let's go to the next picture then, Lee. And as I said earlier, these games were played at the Rocky Mount Municipal Stadium. And this is the stadium, and I could not find a date on this picture. I'm going to guess we're talking somewhere in the 1950s, perhaps as early as the early 1960s. But this is very much as I remember the stadium as a child. I have some very fond memories of watching Rocky Mount Senior High School football games sitting up there on the top of those bleachers too. So as I said, I'm not exactly sure. There was no date on this picture. And I hope he's watching. One of our viewers, Randy Harrell from Rocky Mount, his father, and I looked for a picture, and I think Randy may have one, and I may have one that he sent me. I just didn't have a chance to dig it up tonight to show it to you tonight's show. But Randy's father was actually a sign painter, from what I understand, and painted many of the advertising signs that used to outline the outside of the back wall back there around the outfield of this stadium. And so I'm sure many of you remember there were all kind of advertisements all along the outfield wall out there. And Randy Harrell's father was a sign painter who painted, if not all, certainly a great deal of those advertisements out there. Okay, Lee. So as I said, this I think is from either 1950s, perhaps as late as 1960s. This next picture, Lee, go ahead and pull up, is from 1987. Now, I'm not exactly sure when the stadium ceased to be in existence, but this 1987 picture, can we get it up there, Lee? Okay. Not Charlie. Oh, shoot. Bernie Capps, thank you. My mind went blank for a minute. Bernie Capps had this picture, and of course, Bernie's now deceased, but he had contributed this picture to a website, and they gave credit to Bernie for providing this picture. And again, this was from 1987, and you see the little advertisement there in the upper left-hand corner, Rocky Mount Pines. And so now the picture itself is from 87 supposedly. I'm not sure that the Rocky Mount Pines logo in the upper left-hand corner is attributable to this exact picture here, but the website itself was dedicated to Rocky Mount baseball and some of the teams that played over the years and some of the players. I found some rosters there, and I'd hoped to get some of them. I just ran out of time trying to get ready for the night's show. Okay, Lee, let's go to the next picture then. And I think this next picture is just a quick, there you go, just a logo of the Rocky Mount Pines. And as I said, the Pines were 1980 season was just a terrible year for Rocky Mount baseball. If you were a baseball fan in 1980, you kind of wanted to hide your head and hope for a better time, because it was just a horrible, horrible season. The team went 24-114, 24 wins against 114 losses. By anybody's standard, it was a bad year. And you know, you can't talk about Rocky Mount baseball without talking about two individuals that really had a major impact on not only Rocky Mount baseball, but the sport of baseball itself. And certainly number one of those would be Buck Leonard. Lee, if you would, let's bring up the next picture. There you go, there's Buck Leonard. Inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1972. He played for the Negro League, the Homestead Grays. I ran across a really neat article here that was done back in 2020 by a fellow named Manny Randhawa. And I won't read this whole thing, it's kind of long, but I just want to read a little bit about it. It says, the legendary Josh Gibson is widely considered the greatest power hitter in Negro League's history, launching prodigious blasts that earned him the nickname the Black Babe Ruth. But there was another great slugger behind him in the Homestead Grays lineup, hitting cleanup and being dubbed the Black Lou Gehrig. Walter Fenner Buck Leonard played in Negro League's record 17 seasons for the same club, the Grays, from 1934 to 1950. He was one of the most prolific hitters in Negro League's baseball history while playing stellar defense at first base. He played in a record 12 East-West All-Star games, and along with Josh Gibson, helped lead the Grays to 4 consecutive Negro World Series championships from 1942 to 1945, and they won in 43 and 44. The Thunder Twins, as they were known, also helped the Grays win a record 9 consecutive Negro National League championships from 1937 to 1945. A few key points to know about Buck Leonard. Leonard began working full-time at age 16 because his hometown of Rocky Mount, North Carolina, did not have a high school at that time, at least not one that he could attend, and his parents weren't able to afford sending him out of town for school. He later went back to school and earned his high school diploma when he was 52 years old. He played semi-pro baseball when he could, but he became a full-time player after he was laid off during the Great Depression. When former Homestead ace Smokey Joe Williams saw Leonard play, he recruited a 26-year-old to join the Grays in 1934. It says if Gibson hit long, towering home runs, Leonard followed by ripping the ball all over the ballpark, into the gaps and over the wall. He was called the Black Lou Gehrig, but according to those who watched Leonard play, he might have been the superior defensive player when compared with the Iron Horse. Buck Leonard was the equal of any first baseman who ever lived, said Giants great Monty Irvin. If he had gotten a chance to play in the major leagues, they might have called Lou Gehrig the White Buck Leonard. Quite a compliment there for quite a baseball player. And Buck Leonard certainly deserved and earned every accolade that he has gotten over the years. Okay, Lee, let's go to the next picture then. And I mentioned there's two great players that are often associated with Rocky Mount, Buck Leonard being the one, and then Jim Thorpe being the other. And Jim Thorpe's story is every bit as interesting, though in an entirely different way. Jim Thorpe, was a baseball player and went to the Olympics in 1912. Won, oh God, I forgot now how many medals he won in the 1912 Olympics. But sadly, because it was found out later that he had played some minor league ball here in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, before he went to the Olympics, his medals were stripped from him. Now, in later years, they were returned, if you reinstigated, or whatever you want to call the term, his medals were given back. I mean, his Olympic medals that he had been essentially robbed from were given back to him. But it was just a shame that the man, I mean, he played in a league that certainly was not on par with Major League Baseball. And though he was a fine athlete and a fine ball player and certainly contributed greatly to the game of baseball, to have him publicly humiliated by having his Olympic medals taken away from him was just unfathomable. And like I said, he later got them back in later years. But he was certainly a great athlete in his own right, not just in baseball. He was just an all-around tremendous athlete and played several sports, as I would understand. Okay, Lee. And lastly, let's go to the net. There you go. Many of you remember this marker. It's down there on Church Street by the Imperial Tobacco Center down there. And it says, Indian athlete started in the 1912 Olympics, made his professional baseball debut with the Rocky Mount Railroaders in 1909. And the park was 300 yards west of where this market is. And, my grandfather came to Rocky Mount in the early 1920s from Wilson County, and though he didn't know Jim Thorpe, I can't say he ever saw Jim Thorpe play in person, he did remember that baseball field, and he told me many times about going to baseball games at that park that was, as I said, 300 yards west of where this marker is. And so that was before my time. I can't say I remember anything about a baseball field anywhere near down there. And I played baseball at a few parks around Rocky Mount in my younger days, but this was well before my time. I'll tell you what, Lee, bring it back to me. This is a good time for our next commercial break. When we come back, we're going to show you some old advertisements around town. We're going to look at some buildings. I mentioned to you last week's show that I had a nice little chat with Bruce Smith up at Smith's Red and White earlier this week, last week actually, and he gave me a little bit of history on some of the buildings up there, so we're going to show you some pictures of those and talk a little bit about the history around Dorches. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
Watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Flores Glass and Mirror Company, servicing the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Flores Glass and Mirror Company, servicing the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
And we're back, folks. We've been talking about baseball tonight a little bit, and there was something I wanted to share with you, and I just happened to think about it. I hadn't shared it with you yet. It's a little bit of comical satire, if you will, not satire so much as, I guess, op-ed might be a better way to say it. I ran across this article, and the gentleman, Mr. Leverett T. Smith, and I'm not sure when this was written. I found it on a baseball history website I stumbled across tonight. But I just wanted, there's a couple, 3 or 4 paragraphs I just want to read real quickly. And it's talking about the 1909 Rocky Mount Railroaders baseball team. Now keep in mind, that was a team that caused Jim Thorpe to have his medals taken away, his Olympic medals taken away from him, and of course later reinstated. But 1909, well, I'm just going to read this right here and we'll get to it in just a second. 1909 was the first year in professional baseball for the city of Rocky Mount in this century. The team, nicknamed the Railroaders, distinguished itself, but not for excellence. Despite the presence of Jim Thorpe, they were undisputedly the worst team in the league. For the last month of the season, 5 of the 6 teams struggled for the pennant. Rocky Mount was the 6th, finishing 15.5 games off the pace and an even 10 games behind the 5th place club. But matters were even worse than this. The team was involved in charges of cheating, of purposely losing games, and of using ineligible players. Many of these charges arose out of the city's rivalry with the city of Wilson, which the sport of baseball has continued to give shape to through the years. On August 10th, 1909, manager Walsh of the Railroaders took his team off the field rather than continue a game with Wilson because, in his opinion, the Wilson pitcher was doctoring the baseballs and he couldn't get the umpire to order the game stopped. Walsh's decision and its implication angered the Wilson correspondent to the Raleigh News and Observer, who reported that Walsh's action was a case of sour grapes, for Walsh himself had been known to try the same tricks with less success. 8 days later, the Wilson correspondent accused the Rocky Mount team of playing in such a way as to deny the Wilson team the pennant. According to him, the Railroaders were losing to Wilson's rivals on purpose and would play hard only against Wilson. Sworn affidavits were eventually produced to this effect, and a league meeting was called to consider this and other related issues. The season ended in general confusion. The final standings showed 3 teams tied for first place. Wilmington, Wilson, and Fayetteville all had 49 and 41 records. After a good deal of wrangling, and for reasons undisclosed in any newspaper account I've been able to find, the league directors in Wilson on October 15th, nearly 6 weeks after the end of the season, by unanimous vote, the pennant for the 1909 season was awarded to Wilson. Thus, even with such a distinguished player as Jim Thorpe on the team, Rocky Mount's debut in professional baseball must be termed inauspicious. There was nowhere to go but up. So baseball at Rocky Mount didn't get off such a great start, but in later years they redeemed themselves quite handsomely and indeed had many, many years of good success, good ball playing, good sportsmanship, and a lot of good times were had by a lot of folks watching Rocky Mount baseball over the years. Okay, I mentioned earlier that I had run across some advertisements from the Rocky Mount Telegram over the years that I wanted to share with you tonight. Some of these are just nothing but newspaper ads I just thought were interesting. There's no particular theme, no particular association, anything else particular about it. I thought they would need one to share them with you. The first one is the Johnson Cotton Company, and we actually showed a picture of the Johnson Tobacco Company from a city directory here, I don't know, a couple of months back. You may remember it was just kind of a rough image that appeared in a Rocky Mount city directory. It wasn't a very good quality picture of the building itself. And I must apologize, this picture is not very good either because it's a Rocky Mount Telecom picture, and those pictures tend to be kind of grainy, especially from this far back. But Lee, if you would, let's pull this next picture up. Should be number 19 on your list in there. And this is the Johnson Cotton Company. There you go. If you'll notice, the advertisement at the top says, use only genuine John Deere parts. They'll save you money in the long run. Now, as it turns out, can you zoom in a little bit, Lee? That gentleman standing there, I believe, and I wish I could call and get him to verify this for me, I believe that is Gus Tullis's father. Gus Tullis's father, John Tullis, is mentioned here as being the dealer. And but anyway, this was located down on South Church Street. Maybe you remember where Tullis Tractor in later years was. It's now something else altogether. But originally that building and that business was referred to as a Johnson Cotton Company. And they sold John Deere tractor parts, of course. And Mr. John Tullis was the local dealer. And I think, I'm not positive, but I think that might be him right there in that picture. And if so, that would be Gus Tullis's father. And this picture actually appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in 1956. And so, like I said, in later years, this business became Tullis Tractor Company, and the rest, as they say, is history. Okay, Lee, let's go to the next picture, if you would. And this one is another newspaper advertisement that I really should probably have included in the baseball segment. I apologize that I did not. I didn't think about it until I just realized it. This is Rocky Mountain new car dealers inviting the public to open house at the Municipal Stadium Friday night, April the 1st, for a ball game. And if you zoom in there, Lee, a little bit, I'm not exactly sure, and scroll down a bit, there were several car dealers that got together and put this ad on, and I think they're listed, Lee, at the very bottom of the page down there. I mean, you may have to scroll up some if you would. As I said, this is Friday night, April the 1st, from 7 to 10. They were going to have a bunch of new cars on display, a $500,000 worth of 1960 new cars and trucks, display of horseless carriages, vintage models, fully equipped. They're going to have door prizes, a portable television is going to be given away. They had free refreshments. Keep on going down, Lee. They're the sponsor I see now, and it's probably a little hard to read. John Van Motors over on the left-hand side, I see there. Ferris Motors, I see Davenport Motor on the right, Flakeby Chipley, Lincoln Mercury dealer, Cadell Motors, Bullock Auto Sales, Ray Bandy, AC Motors, Allen Mims. But I don't know, maybe a dozen or so local car dealers got together and put this ad. This was almost a full page ad. I had to shrink it down considerably to get it to the size you see here, but it was about a full page ad that came out in 1960. And I don't recall ever seeing, there may have been others, I just don't recall seeing other ads of this nature in the Telegram referencing an event at the Rocky Mountain Municipal Stadium. But in 1960, April 1, this was a big deal, obviously. Okay, Lee. Another thing I ran across that I don't recall seeing before was an advertisement for Sears in 1940. Okay, zoom out on that, Lee, because it's zoomed in quite a bit there. There you go. Keep going. There you go. And see if you can zoom out even more, because this is a one line. There you go. This was from the City Directory in 1948, the Rocky Mount City Directory. Now you'll notice there it says Sears Rubicon Company Order Office, 157 Main Street, Southeast Maine, and it's got, of course, telephone number there, 2533. But I got to think, I said, wait a minute, I don't ever remember there being a Sears on Main Street. I remember there being Sears on Church Street, and of course they had little small, little Sears, you might as well say a branch store in later years over here off Tiffany Boulevard, off Bivany Road. But I never remember hearing anything about a Sears on Main Street. So I got to do a little digging, and lo and behold, in 1948, Sears did occupy a space on Main Street. You see the address there, 157 Main Street. And let's go to the next picture, Lee. This is just a listing. I wanted to share this with you first of all, because this is from the city director, as I said. Wow, how do we get back? There we go. Okay, and again, here you go. This is same address, 157 South Main Street. For sale, preparing for spring gardening needs now. We have all kinds of fishing equipment. See our window displays, Sears Roebuck and Company at 157 South Main Street. And again, I was baffled by it. I never heard tell of Sears being on Main Street. Now, some of you may remember this. I cannot say that I remember anything about Sears on Main Street. But they obviously had a store there, and they had an order office. And Lee, the next picture, if you would, let's go ahead and pull that up. And this is a reference to, it says, attention farmers, visit Sears Roebuck order office or call, you see the number, 2633, for your dairy supplies. They sold Farm Master milkers at Sears in 1940. This was from 1945, actually. Now available, including single unit milkers, 6-gallon and plated steel pails, vacuum pump outfit, and 10 stall cocks. Also, large line of all plumbing supplies. Can't imagine who designed this ad and managed to work all these different types of things together into one ad. But in any case, in 1945, you could order milkers for your cows from Sears, and you could also order plumbing stuff from 157 South Main Street here in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Now, let's go to the next picture, Lee, because I wanted to see where 157 South Main Street was. And so this next picture is actually 157 South Main Street today. That's Davis Furniture to your right there. Down to your left is the Planters Bank building. But that little small place right there with the yellow sign above it is 157. And I do know over the years there's been some slight adjustments and changing of the addresses up and down Main Street, so I'm not entirely certain that this was the exact same spot that Sears occupied in 1957. But when I zoomed in on this picture, I could plainly see 157 on the front of this space here with the yellow sign above it. So somewhere in this immediate vicinity, if it wasn't this exact spot, it was somewhere close to here, in the 1940s and 1950s, Sears Roebuck had a location. So who knew? I didn't. All right, we're almost out of time. I've got a few more shots. I mentioned that I talked last week with Bruce Smith up at the Smith's Red and White. And we talked about the buildings that were across the street from Smith's, specifically the old brick building there, and then the white building right beside it. And by the way, if you've not been by there in the last day or so, the old brick building is gone. It got demolished. They started tearing it down yesterday, and today it's gone. And it's quite a difference when you scan across the parking lot from Smith's Red and White now and look where that old brick building used to be. But that building, and we're not exactly sure, Bruce said he wasn't sure either. In fact, let's go ahead and pull this next picture up, because I think this first picture here, this is an advertisement that appeared in the paper in 1966. Now, keep in mind, I was talking about the brick building there that's been torn down. That was the old, and we'll show you some pictures of that in just a minute. That building was actually, as far back as Bruce can remember anyway, it was the W.D. Snipes General Merchandise. And I heard some neat stories about Mr. Snipes. But to the right of that building is a white building. It's still standing today. That building did not get demolished. But that was where Ellen's store was. Mr. George Ellen's run that store there. And they were having, the Deutsches Ruritan Club had an auction sale at Ellen's store Saturday the 5th, 1960, March the 5th, 1966 at 10:30 a.m. Said anyone can sell, anyone can buy, deliver items only before Saturday, March the 5th. Barbecue dinner will be served. So this was an ad that appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in 1966 for a Deutsches Ruritan auction sale that was held right there at Ellen's store, which is that white store just to the right of the brick store I mentioned just a moment ago. So Lee, if you would, let's go to the next article or next listing here, because this is a tax listing, and this was kind of interesting to me because what it says is, and I'll kind of read over it quickly, it says, notice, residents of Stony Creek Township, notice is hereby given that the list taker will sit at the following places and the times named, and at all other times during the month of January 1956 will be at Ellen's store in Dorches. So this is a list of stores where you could go and list your taxes in 1956. Wheelis' store, Shorty's Grill at Little Easenburg, Weaver's store at Big Easenburg, Sasser's store, Rocky Mountain Meals Canteen, Bienvenue at Davis Cash Grocery, Nash Brickyards, the Sheriff's Office in Rocky Mount, Swelton Heights at Wallace Market, Buck Overton's, and Dorches at Ellen's store. And so It said all listings must be done during the month of January as of January 1st. Failure to list will be subject to a 10% penalty. And so that's something that I can't say I remember hearing about before, that there were these places set up around all over the area where you could go, and hopefully it would be somewhere close to where you lived, and list your taxes without having to get in your car and drive, you know, a distance to do so. But that was just something I'd never run across before. Okay, Lee, real quick, let's go ahead and buzz. We've only got a couple minutes left. Let's buzz these last pictures here. These are just pictures I took of the stores that are across. Hope we got a call. And Lee, while we're closing out, go ahead and run through these pictures and I'll get this call here. Hey, hello, Harold. I'm doing well. How are you? All right, are you there? Harold?
I remember when we had tax listings in January of each year, and they used country stores around in different communities, and my dad's store was always a place you could list your tax, and it was public notice done, as you just showed, what days they would be listing the tax, and that was what you had to do in those days, list your tax during the month of January.
Yeah, that's something I never knew existed. I thought it was interesting that they made it convenient for people to go do that. That was neat. Sure was.
It's probably more convenient than today.
Absolutely.
Ask you, what is being done with the old Rueton clubhouse out there in Dorchester?
Well, you know, it moved.
It was moved.
Yeah, Bruce bought it and moved it around back behind his store back there, off behind the dollar store, actually. Bruce owns that land back there, too.
So he'll use that for some private storage or whatever.
My understanding is he's going to rent it out for birthday parties, special occasions, those kind of things. But he put a ton of money in it. So it's going to be a nice venue. Yes, sir.
Okay, that sounds good.
That's the Dorchester Event Center.
It sounds good. It sure does.
All right, buddy. Have a good night.
Thank you, buddy.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. We've run slam out of time. I want to thank the callers and thank you, viewers, for tuning in. It's always my pleasure to be with you each week. Hope you learned something tonight. Hope you look forward to next week. I sure do. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Have yourselves a great week, and we'll see you next week with more Way Back Wednesday. Good night.